The Bermuda Triangle begins as a shape on a map, a triangle stretched across the Atlantic Ocean, connecting Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. But for millions of people across America and Europe, that triangle represents far more than geography. It represents a question that refuses to die, an enigma wrapped in countless stories. How can a region so open, so visible, so heavily traveled, remain one of the most mysterious places on Earth? For Americans, the triangle is the ghost that haunts the edges of modern exploration. For Europeans, particularly those who spent centuries navigating the Atlantic, it is a reminder that the ocean still holds secrets no sailor or scientist has fully unraveled. And for all of us, it is a symbol of the limits of our understanding, a place where radar fails, compasses spin, and human certainty dissolves into the deep. But long before newspapers coined the term Bermuda Triangle, long before conspiracy theorists filled modern documentaries and late-night talk shows with speculation, the region had already earned a reputation for being strange. Sailors from the early European empires, Spain, Portugal, England, wrote of waters that seemed cursed. They told of ships losing their bearings under clear skies, of sudden storms appearing without warning, and of seas so quiet they felt unnatural. To understand the modern mystery, we must first step back into those early centuries when ocean travel was an act of faith more than science. Imagine the view from the deck of a wooden galleon in the 1500s. No engines, no satellites, no weather forecasts, just wind stars and the hope that the sea would not turn against you. In those days, the Atlantic was a place of awe and terror. Storms were gods, currents were invisible rivers, and the ocean floor was a world no human had ever seen. The region we now call the Bermuda Triangle sat along the primary trade routes connecting Europe to the Americas. Ships laden with gold supplies and settlers crossed those waters constantly. And yet, despite being one of the most traveled stretches of ocean, it was also one of the most feared. Sailors reported strange lights flickering under the waves. They witnessed patches of ocean that seemed to boil without heat, and every so often, a ship simply never arrived. These early disappearances, scattered across decades and recorded in old maritime logs, became the first whispers of a legend. But it would take centuries and the rise of aviation for the Bermuda Triangle to transform from rumor into global phenomenon. One of the earliest modern incidents occurred long before the public had a name for the region. The story involves the USS Cyclops, a massive American naval collier that vanished in the year 1918. The ship carried more than 300 men and a full load of manganese ore. It left Barbados and was scheduled to arrive in Baltimore. It never did. No SOS, no wreckage, no survivors. The Cyclops remains one of the largest non-combat losses in American naval history, and even today, the U.S. Navy cannot explain its disappearance. For many, this was the moment the Atlantic earned its reputation as a graveyard of giants. But the incident that truly thrust the triangle into modern myth did not take place until the middle of the 20th century. On a clear December day in 1945, 5 American torpedo bombers, known as Flight 19, took off from Fort Lauderdale for a routine training mission. The sky was calm, the pilots were experienced. Everything should have gone smoothly. Yet minutes after the mission began, something went wrong. The leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, reported that his compass was malfunctioning. Not an unusual problem, but one that can be handled if a pilot maintains visual references. But Taylor soon radioed that he did not recognize any landmarks. He believed they were hundreds of miles off course, somewhere over the Florida Keys, though records show they were nowhere near them. The other pilots, trusting their commander, followed his instructions. Their final transmissions were filled with confusion. The sea looked wrong, the sky looked strange. And then, the radios went silent. A rescue plane dispatched to find them vanished as well. 6 aircraft, 27 men. No remains ever found. The disappearance of Flight 19 became a cultural lightning bolt. Newspapers across America and Europe seized on the story. Radio shows speculated wildly. Were the pilots swallowed by a sudden squall? Did their instruments fail, or was something stranger at work? The public imagination turned the Bermuda Triangle into a vortex of mystery, a place where the rules of reality seemed to warp. But why this particular region? Why not the Mediterranean, the Baltic, or the Pacific? The truth is that those waters also have their tragedies, storms, disappearances, shipwrecks. Yet the Bermuda Triangle dominates the Western imagination for a reason deeper than mere statistics. It sits at the crossroads of science, mythology, psychology, and human fear. Start with geography. The triangle lies along powerful ocean currents, including the Gulf Stream, a fast-moving river within the sea, capable of sweeping debris away in hours. The deep trenches of the Atlantic, including the Puerto Rico Trench, are among the deepest parts of the world's oceans. Any ship or plane that sinks there may never be found, simply because the ocean is unimaginably huge and unbelievably complex. Then there is the weather. Warm ocean temperatures fuel sudden storms and waterspouts, and the region is a breeding ground for hurricanes. A ship could sail under a perfectly blue sky and be battered by a storm 20 minutes later. Modern meteorology helps, but in earlier centuries and even today, storm systems can develop faster than human prediction. But facts alone do not create legends. Human beings do. The Bermuda Triangle became iconic because it marries mystery with possibility. It is a place where technology fails, and when technology fails, humans feel exposed. The idea that a pilot trained, disciplined, confident could look out the window and say, "Nothing looks right," is deeply unsettling. It taps into a primal fear, the fear of losing control. For Europeans whose ancestors crossed the Atlantic in fragile ships, the Bermuda Triangle echoes the terror of the unknown. For Americans, with a culture rooted in exploration, flight, and technological mastery, the Triangle represents a challenge, a reminder that even in an age of satellites and digital maps, the Earth still keeps secrets. This emotional weight is why the Triangle continues to dominate documentaries, podcasts, and late-night debates. Even with modern explanations, rogue waves, magnetic variations, methane hydrates, human error, the myth refuses to die. People crave mystery. They crave the edge of the map, and that edge for many is the Bermuda Triangle. As we stand at the beginning of our exploration, it is important to understand what the Triangle truly represents. Not just a region of ocean, not just a zone of disappearances, but a symbol, a challenge to everything we think we know about the world. Its legends are built on both fact and imagination, and the truth lies somewhere between them. In this series, we will dive into the darkest incidents, the strangest scientific theories, the wildest conspiracies, and the very real forces of nature that shape the region. We will examine the ancient maritime legends that preceded the Triangle, the modern aviation events that turned it into a phenomenon, and the psychological pull that keeps the mystery alive. But before we move deeper, we must acknowledge something fundamental. The Bermuda Triangle is not a single mystery. It is a collection of stories, stories of fear, wonder, tragedy, and sometimes pure coincidence. It is a mosaic of human perception layered over an unpredictable sea. As we journey through this narrative, you will see how those stories were formed, how they evolved, and why they endure. You will hear the voices of sailors who stared into impossible horizons, pilots who flew into clear skies only to find themselves lost, and scientists who chase answers across data waves and history. Chapter 1 ends not with an explanation, but with an invitation to look beyond what you think you know, to challenge your assumptions, and to enter the Bermuda Triangle with eyes open. For the only way to understand a mystery this vast is to sail directly into it. To understand the Bermuda Triangle, one must begin not with aircraft or modern navigation systems, but with the earliest and most fragile vessels ever to cross the Atlantic. Before steel hulls, before engines, before radar, the first Europeans who ventured into these waters came in wooden ships that groaned with every wave. Their sails cracked like whips in the wind, and their compasses were crude tools, easily influenced by the mysterious magnetic fields of the sea. These early sailors were not scientists. They were explorers, traders, and sometimes fugitives. Their journals, written in shaking hands under flickering lantern light, described the Atlantic as if it were a living creature. Those who survived the journey spoke of the ocean with reverence. Those who vanished left behind stories that others would whisper for centuries. The Bermuda Triangle lies along what was once known as the Devil's Road, not because of any supernatural belief, but because the route was treacherous, unpredictable, and filled with unexplained events. Ships on this path often reported losing their bearings. Their compasses behaved strangely, pointing not toward true north, but veering wildly without reason. Today we understand that magnetic variation is a natural phenomenon, but to a sailor in the 1500s, a spinning compass was a sign of doom. European sailors wrote of waters that glowed at night, not knowing they were witnessing bioluminescent plankton. They described sudden columns of water rising from the sea waterspouts, but to them these were monstrous towers of ocean trying to pierce the sky. They saw lights flicker beneath the waves and believed spirits were trapped under the surface. They sailed through patches of ocean that were perfectly still for weeks, trapped in the infamous Sargasso Sea, where the wind died and the seaweed thickened like a floating forest. Imagine the psychological effect of drifting for days under a sun so relentless it seemed eternal. No wind, no escape. Just the creaking of the ship and the growing fear that something was holding them in place. Stories of ghost ships likely originated here. Ships found drifting without a crew, sails torn, no sign of struggle, as if the ocean had swallowed the people but spared the vessel. Many of these legends were born from genuine terror. When the first Europeans encountered the Sargasso Sea, they believed the seaweed could trap their ships forever. This fear seeped into their stories and helped shape early myths of the region, myths that would eventually feed into the modern concept of the Bermuda Triangle. The indigenous peoples of the Caribbean also had their own tales. Some spoke of waters where the spirits of the sea roamed freely. Others believed there were places where the boundary between the living and the dead became thin. Their myths were not written in books, but passed through generations by word of mouth. Though filtered through time, these early beliefs left echoes that later explorers would recognize in their own unsettling experiences. Yet the early centuries of exploration were not defined solely by fear. They were also marked by ambition. The promise of new worlds and untold wealth pushed sailors to confront the unknown. And the unknown pushed back. Many ships that vanished in the region were never seen again, not because of paranormal forces, but because the ocean is vast and unforgiving. A single storm could tear a ship apart. A sudden shift in wind could blow it hundreds of miles off course, and without modern communication, a ship that disappeared was simply gone. Still, it is important to understand why these early tales matter. Humans construct myths when they cannot explain what they see. Over time, these myths build upon one another, creating a foundation of fear and fascination. By the time modern science arrived, the Bermuda Triangle already carried centuries of superstition, making every subsequent disappearance seem like part of a pattern. The region's reputation grew during the Age of Sail. In the 1700s, the British Navy logged dozens of ships lost in the Atlantic with no explanation. Some were caught in hurricanes, which the sailors could not foresee or track. Others encountered rogue waves, massive walls of water rising without warning, a phenomenon only recently confirmed by modern science. But at the time, sailors believed these waves were mythical beasts, creatures of the sea that rose up to devour them whole. There are accounts from Spanish galleons describing how the sea seemed to rise from below, striking the ship with such force that masts snapped like twigs. Other logs describe nights where the stars themselves seemed to move in circles, disorienting the crew. Today, scientists understand that rolling seas can distort a sailor's perception of the horizon, making the stars appear to spiral, a terrifying illusion for those who navigated by starlight. The combination of fierce weather, unpredictable currents, magnetic variation, and primitive navigation created an environment ripe for tragedy, and each tragedy added another layer to the legend. But the ocean was not the only source of danger. Human error played a significant role in many disappearances. A misread map, a delayed decision, an assumption made under pressure, these could spell doom for an entire crew. When disasters struck, the survivors often searched for meaning beyond human mistake. They spoke of cursed waters, vengeful spirits, and unnatural forces. These explanations were easier to bear than the idea that a single wrong choice led to the deaths of dozens. These beliefs were particularly strong among sailors who had grown up with maritime superstition. Even in the 19th century, many seafarers refused to whistle on deck, believing it summoned storms. They avoided lighting 3 cigarettes with a single match, a superstition carried over from naval warfare. They refused to change the name of a ship, fearing it angered the gods of the sea. In such an environment, any strange occurrence, a malfunctioning compass, an odd cloud formation, an unexpected current, could be interpreted as a sign of supernatural forces at work. As American and European trade increased, so did the number of ships traversing the Bermuda Triangle. More traffic meant more disasters, more reports, more fuel for the legend. Newspapers in the 1800s were eager to publish dramatic accounts of sea voyages gone wrong. Sensational stories sold well, and the public's appetite for maritime mystery was endless. By the time the 20th century arrived, the Bermuda Triangle had transformed from a sailor's fear into a defined cultural phenomenon. The introduction of aviation changed everything. Ships disappearing was one thing, oceans were deep, storms were vicious, and debris could drift for miles. But planes were supposed to be modern, controlled, precise. Their disappearances felt far more shocking. The early decades of flight were full of wonder, promise, and danger. Pilots pushed beyond known limits, navigating not just oceans, but skies that were still largely unmapped. And as aviation expanded over the Atlantic, the Triangle's reputation darkened. One of the earliest major aviation incidents occurred in the 1920s when several small mail planes vanished during flights between Florida and the Caribbean islands. Radio communication was primitive and weather forecasting was still evolving. Many of these disappearances were likely caused by storms or navigational errors, but the lack of wreckage ignited public fascination. Each missing plane added fuel to the emerging fire. Then came the 1930s, a decade that saw aviation grow rapidly. Air travel was no longer a novelty, it was becoming a true industry. Passengers wanted speed, companies wanted profit, pilots wanted glory. And yet, the Bermuda Triangle remained unpredictable. Storms formed quickly. The air above the Gulf Stream behaved strangely. Visibility could shift from clear to dense fog in minutes. Pilots reported compass variations similar to those sailors had seen centuries earlier. Though we now understand that magnetic variation in the region is complex, at the time it reinforced superstitions. When planes failed to arrive, newspapers once again seized the chance to tell dramatic stories. The idea of a region where both ships and aircraft disappeared captured the imagination of millions. But the event that defined the Bermuda Triangle, the disappearance of Flight 19 in the year 1945, did more than reinforce a legend. It signaled the beginning of a new era of speculation. The public began questioning not just human error or natural forces, but possibilities beyond science, time, distortions, dimensional shifts, alien intervention, or forces unknown to humanity. And it is here, in the overlap of history and myth, that the Bermuda Triangle became more than a story. It became a symbol, a place where scientific reasoning and human imagination collided. Chapter 2 is about understanding how that symbol was built. It was constructed from the fears of early sailors, the tragedies of maritime exploration, the growing pains of aviation, and the human tendency to seek meaning in chaos. If the triangle had no history, no centuries of whispered warnings, the disappearance of Flight 19 might have been viewed as an isolated tragedy. Instead, it became part of a growing narrative that stretched back to the earliest days of Atlantic exploration. The legend of the Bermuda Triangle is multi-layered. It is shaped by real events, scientific anomalies, cultural beliefs, and psychological forces. These layers intertwine, creating a story far more complex than any single incident. To understand the triangle, one must first acknowledge that history matters. Every vanished ship, every strange sighting, every unexplained event contributed to a larger mythos. As we continue deeper into the narrative, we will explore the scientific theories, the conspiracies, and the eyewitness accounts that have fueled this mystery. But before we move on, remember this: the Bermuda Triangle is not simply a place where things disappear. It is a place where human perception, fear, and imagination shape the stories we tell. It is a region where history meets myth and where myth becomes history, and it is only the beginning. To truly grasp the weight of the Bermuda Triangle's legacy, one must understand the anatomy of a disappearance. Not the myth, not the dramatized versions told in late-night documentaries, but the quiet, chilling reality that sinks ships and swallows aircraft. It begins not with a scream, not with panic, but with a moment so ordinary that no one recognizes it as the beginning of the end. Most disappearances in the triangle follow a pattern, not a supernatural one, but a human one. The ocean, vast and relentless, seldom kills quickly. Instead, it unravels the thin threads of a situation until a single failure becomes catastrophic. Weather shifts, instruments falter, decisions compound, and at some point, the vessel crosses an invisible line where return becomes impossible. This chapter examines these patterns not to reduce the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle, but to show how complexity itself fuels legends. A disappearance is rarely caused by one factor. It is a chain reaction, a cascade of small events that snowball into tragedy. And in the triangle, a region of unusual currents, volatile skies, and magnetic anomalies, the chain reaction begins far more easily. To understand this, imagine a ship in the early 20th century. Not a fragile wooden vessel like those of the 1500s, but a steel cargo ship, modern for its time. The engine hums steadily, the crew moves with practiced rhythm, and the radio crackles with the voices of distant stations. Everything feels normal. Then, perhaps without warning, the barometer begins to fall. A falling barometer is a sailor's quiet nightmare. It signals a change in pressure, a storm. But in the waters of the Bermuda Triangle, storms form unusually fast. The warm ocean feeds them like a furnace. What begins as a breeze becomes a gale in minutes. Clouds gather like bruises across the sky. The air thickens. The horizon dissolves. The crew may radio for assistance, but by the time their message reaches shore, the storm is already upon them. Waves rise higher than buildings. Winds scream with a fury that drowns human voices. And in those final moments, the ship is not dragged under by a dramatic whirlpool or a supernatural force. It is simply overwhelmed. But when the storm clears and the sun returns, the ocean appears calm, indifferent. No wreckage, no survivors, no clues. This absence, this blankness, is the true birthplace of mystery. Humans fear what they cannot see. When a plane crashes on land, investigators have debris, black boxes, tracks, clues. At sea, the evidence sinks. The ocean floor absorbs stories like a vault that never opens. A disappearance without evidence becomes an invitation to imagination. This is especially true in aviation disasters. A ship might take hours to sink, but a plane, particularly one from the early or mid-20th century, can vanish in seconds. Weather can blind pilots. Fog can disorient them. A sudden downdraft can force the aircraft toward the ocean before anyone can react. The Gulf Stream then carries pieces away so quickly that recovery becomes nearly impossible. Take, for instance, the disappearance of Star Tiger in the year 1948. The plane, a Tudor Mark IV aircraft, was flying from the Azores to Bermuda. This was long after the earliest days of aviation, yet still decades before precise satellite navigation. The crew reported everything normal until their final check-in. Then silence. No distress call, no sign of mechanical trouble. When the search team scoured the ocean, they found nothing, not a single cushion, not a scrap of metal. The Atlantic had erased every trace. Investigators concluded that the plane likely descended too low and was caught in a downdraft, but without evidence, the public filled the gap with imagination. And imagination rarely chooses the mundane explanation. Another example is the disappearance of Star Ariel in the year 1949, almost precisely 1 year later. Different plane, different route, similar outcome, clear skies, normal radio communication, then nothing, a void. The back-to-back vanishings seemed too coincidental for many observers. Two nearly identical aircraft flying similar routes lost within a year. Statistically, such coincidences can occur, but to the public, they felt like a pattern, a design, a sign that something beyond human understanding was at work. The anatomy of a disappearance also involves the human psyche. Humans naturally seek patterns, especially when confronted with chaos. The Bermuda Triangle's reputation grew because it offered just enough mystery to create the illusion of a hidden design. Each vanished vessel added a tile to a mosaic the public was eager to expand. But disappearances are not always sudden. Some begin slowly with subtle markers that go unnoticed. A pilot reports strange haze, a sailor notes unusual swells, a compass spins for a second before stabilizing. These details seem harmless in the moment. Only later, when the vessel fails to arrive, do they become ominous clues. In certain cases, an entire series of failures aligns with uncanny precision. Imagine a pilot navigating by compass. A small magnetic variation, common in the region, shifts his heading by just a few degrees. He continues flying confidently, unaware that he has veered off course. Meanwhile, fuel decreases. Clouds reduce visibility. A storm brews ahead. By the time the pilot realizes he is lost, radio towers are out of range. He cannot correct his heading. The ocean below is all he sees, and the end becomes inevitable. A small mistake has become a fatal divergence. This subtlety defines many triangle incidents. The pilots of Flight 19 did not panic at first. They believed they were east of the Florida Keys. In reality, they were far out to sea. The wrong assumption, just one wrong assumption, cascaded into disaster. It is tempting to imagine disappearances as dramatic events, ships being swallowed, planes being pulled from the sky. But reality is quieter, more haunting. A vessel disappears not because the ocean roars, but because it whispers. A pilot becomes lost, not in a storm of fire, but in a fog of uncertainty. Yet the modern world, with all its technology, has not escaped the triangle's unsettling reputation. Even today, with GPS and satellite communications, incidents still occur. Not as frequently, not as dramatically, but still enough to keep the legend alive. In the year 1999, the cargo ship Genesis disappeared without sending a distress signal. In the year 2013, A small Beechcraft aircraft vanished between Puerto Rico and Florida. In the year 2017, another small plane carrying a mother and her 2 children disappeared en route to Miami. Some debris was found days later, but the ocean had already taken its secrets. These modern events lack the scale of Flight 19 or the USS Cyclops, but they maintain the pattern that has existed for centuries: sudden loss, incomplete evidence, unanswered questions. The Bermuda Triangle is not unique in having maritime and aviation disasters. The Pacific Ocean is far more dangerous. The Indian Ocean has swallowed entire airliners in the modern age. But what makes the triangle distinct is the density of traffic combined with the complexity of the environment. More ships and planes travel through this area than nearly any other ocean region. More traffic means more potential for accidents. Add volatile weather, strong currents, and magnetic variation, and the region becomes a perfect storm of risk. The anatomy of a disappearance is rarely supernatural, but it never feels mundane. This tension, this blend of logic and fear, gives the triangle its cultural power. Every missing vessel becomes another thread in a tapestry woven across centuries. But there is one final layer to consider: the psychological layer. When a region is known for mystery, every incident is viewed through a lens of expectation. The public anticipates weirdness. The absence of evidence becomes proof rather than an investigative challenge. People believe the triangle is dangerous, so they interpret every disappearance as confirmation. Cognitive bias, expectation pattern, seeking these shape the legend as much as the ocean itself. The Bermuda Triangle is not simply a place where disappearances occur. It is a place where disappearances feel significant. This distinction matters. Without it, the triangle would be nothing more than a geographic area with storms and currents. With it, the triangle becomes a narrative, a living story fed by centuries of fear and fascination. As we move deeper into the legend, we will examine the theories, scientific, speculative, and supernatural, that attempt to explain the triangle's mysteries. Some are grounded in physics, some in oceanography, others border on the fantastical. But each one reveals something about the human desire to understand the unknown. For now, remember this: a disappearance is not a moment. It is a sequence, a story with missing pages. And in the Bermuda Triangle, those missing pages are what make the tale unforgettable. For centuries, the Bermuda Triangle has been described as a place where nature seems to turn against reason, where storms form with impossible speed, and where the sky behaves in ways that defy expectation. To many, these phenomena have been interpreted as signs of supernatural influence. But the truth, or at least the scientific foundation beneath the myth, is both more grounded and more astonishing than fiction. The triangle is not just a patch of ocean. It is a confluence of forces, a meeting place of air and sea where physics, temperature, and geography collide at angles found nowhere else on Earth. If the ocean has lungs, this region is where it breathes hardest. If the sky has moods, this is where they swing with the greatest intensity. The scientific basis for the triangle's strange reputation begins with a simple fact: this is one of the most dynamic weather zones on the planet. To understand the science behind the storms, we must examine the forces at work above and below the surface, because in the Bermuda Triangle, weather is not merely a matter of clouds and wind. It is a product of deep ocean heat, rapid atmospheric instability, and currents that behave like conveyor belts of chaos. The Gulf Stream is the first and perhaps most important player in this equation. This powerful current flows like a river through the Atlantic, carrying warm water from the Gulf of Mexico up the east coast of the United States and across the ocean to Europe. Its speed can reach over 5 miles per hour, deceptively fast, for a body of water thousands of feet deep. Ships that break apart in its path can have their debris scattered over vast distances in hours, not days. A plane that crashes into the ocean may leave fragments that the current shreds and carries beyond the reach of search teams within a single afternoon. But the Gulf Stream does more than move water. It fuels the atmosphere above it. Warm water releases heat energy, and the Atlantic in this region is one of the warmest expanses of ocean on Earth. This heat rises into the air, creating a volatile relationship between the sea and sky. When cooler air masses from the north collide with the warm, moist air rising from the Gulf Stream, the result is violent instability. A clear sky can become a thunderstorm in less than half an hour. A calm horizon can morph into towering cumulonimbus clouds, reaching tens of thousands of feet into the atmosphere. Pilots have reported flying into tranquil air only to emerge seconds later into turbulence so fierce it feels as though the aircraft is being pulled apart. Meteorologists refer to this as explosive development. In the Bermuda Triangle, explosive development is not rare, it is routine. These storms behave differently from those in more temperate regions. They can twist into waterspouts, spinning columns of water that rise hundreds of feet into the air. To sailors of earlier centuries, these waterspouts were terrifying sights, appearing as giant serpents rising from the sea. Modern science explains their formation, but for a ship caught beneath one, the effect is just as deadly as any mythical creature. Small vessels can be capsized instantly. Larger ones may suffer structural damage that leads to later failure. If the ship sinks, the Gulf Stream erases the evidence. Another scientific element that contributes to the triangle's mystique is the presence of microbursts, sudden, violent downdrafts that plunge toward the ocean with devastating force. These bursts of air can slam into an aircraft with the strength of a hammer, pushing it downward faster than the pilot can respond. At lower altitudes, microbursts can bring an aircraft into the water before the pilot has time to send a distress call. With no radio warning and no debris floating afterward, the incident becomes another entry in the triangle's long list of unexplained vanishings. But not all dangers come from above. The ocean floor beneath the Bermuda Triangle is equally dramatic. The Atlantic basin here drops sharply into deep trenches, including the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest point in the entire Atlantic Ocean. If a plane or ship sinks into these depths, recovery becomes nearly impossible. Pressure increases so rapidly with depth that wreckage can implode before reaching the ocean floor. An object that falls into these trenches may never be found, not because it was taken by mysterious forces, but because the ocean is more immense and hostile than most people realize. The geology of the region also introduces another factor: methane hydrates. These are ice-like compounds formed under high pressure on the ocean floor. When disturbed, either by seismic activity or shifting sediment, they can release massive bubbles of methane gas. When this gas rises to the surface, it dramatically reduces water density. A ship caught in such a bubble can lose buoyancy instantly and sink without warning. This phenomenon has been tested in controlled experiments. A solid object floating in water will drop like a stone if the density of the water beneath it suddenly decreases. Though such events are rare, they are entirely possible, and they offer one scientific explanation for certain disappearances that left no distress signals and no floating debris. A ship sinking straight downward into deep water leaves nothing for search teams to find. The Triangle's reputation for swallowing vessels may stem from this natural, if extreme, occurrence. But even methane hydrates do not explain the full range of anomalies in the region. One of the most persistent features of the Bermuda Triangle's reputation is compass variation. While compass anomalies occur in many places around the world, the Triangle sits near one of the few regions where magnetic north and true north align. This causes compasses to behave slightly differently than usual, especially for inexperienced navigators or older vessels. Even a small navigational error, a heading off by a few degrees, can send a ship dozens of miles off course over time. For aircraft flying at high speeds, the error compounds even faster. Pilots in the early and mid-20th century often did not understand magnetic variation. Their training was limited, their instruments were analog, and their aircraft lacked the redundancy and digital accuracy of modern avionics. When their compasses behaved unexpectedly, they sometimes assumed malfunction. When the horizon was obscured by haze or cloud, they had no visual reference. And when fuel began to run low, panic set in. The Bermuda Triangle has always been a region where small mistakes become fatal. This is not to discount the mystery. Even with modern science, there are still incidents that defy full explanation. The disappearance of Flight 19 remains baffling, not because the pilots became lost, that part is understandable, but because 6 aircraft vanished in the same afternoon with no debris ever found. The vanishing of the USS Cyclops in the year 1918 remains confounding because the ship was enormous, capable of enduring storms, and sailed a route heavily trafficked by other vessels. No wreckage, no radio call, no survivors. Science can explain many disappearances, but not all. The atmosphere above the triangle is also home to a phenomenon known as electronic fog. Pilots have reported flying into what appears to be a greyish cloud that surrounds the aircraft and causes instruments to malfunction. Radios crackle, compasses drift, visual references fade. Sometimes the fog dissipates as quickly as it appeared. In other cases, pilots report losing track of time or distance. Though this phenomenon is not fully understood, some scientists believe it may be linked to charged particles in the atmosphere interacting with the aircraft's electrical systems. Electronic fog is not unique to the Bermuda Triangle, but the combination of heat, humidity, and atmospheric instability makes the region particularly prone to it. Pilots who flew through the triangle in the 1950s and 1960s described disorienting conditions that modern pilots still occasionally experience today. But the scientific explanations for the Bermuda Triangle's mysteries do not operate in isolation. They layer on top of each other, creating a complex tapestry that confounds simple answers. This complexity is why the triangle remains such a powerful cultural symbol. People want clear explanations. The ocean offers none. Consider the interaction of storms, currents, magnetic variation, deep trenches, methane hydrates, and human error. Each element alone is manageable. Together, they create an environment where things can go wrong quickly, and when they do, the consequences can be catastrophic. This is the true science behind the storm. It is not a single force, but a symphony of natural processes converging in a single region. And yet, despite this knowledge, despite centuries of study, the triangle continues to fascinate. Because science, for all its power, cannot calm the imagination. When the sky darkens over the Atlantic, when the ocean rises in towering walls, when instruments behave strangely, even the most rational mind feels a tremor of fear. Humans are wired to sense danger in the unknown. The triangle offers that unknown in abundance. There is also the undeniable fact that the Bermuda Triangle is a place where nature reveals its raw, unfiltered power. Hurricanes form here more frequently than almost any other place on Earth. These storms are not minor events. They are vast engines of destruction, capable of reshaping coastlines and leveling cities. The warm waters of the Atlantic feed these storms relentlessly. As climate patterns evolve, storms have grown more intense. This region, already volatile, now sees even greater extremes. Pilots and sailors of earlier centuries faced these dangers without satellites, without radar, without the predictive tools we rely on today. It is no wonder that so many vessels disappeared without explanation. Today, meteorologists can track storms with astonishing accuracy. Pilots can avoid areas of turbulence, and ships can alter course to sidestep hurricanes. But even now, nature retains the upper hand. Weather remains unpredictable. The ocean remains unforgiving. And the triangle remains a region where human confidence meets natural chaos. As we look deeper into the scientific forces that govern the Bermuda Triangle, a pattern emerges not of supernatural threat, but of a region where the ingredients for disaster are constantly stirring. The science does not diminish the mystery. In many ways, it enhances it. The forces at work in the triangle are powerful, dynamic, and often invisible. They operate beneath the surface of our perception, shaping outcomes in ways that feel uncanny. In the chapters that follow, we will turn to the theories, the ones grounded in science, the ones bordering on speculation, and the ones that stretch into the realms of the fantastic. But before we explore those theories, it is crucial to understand the foundation beneath them. The Bermuda Triangle is not merely a stage for stories. It is a place where the Earth's natural rhythms are amplified into something extraordinary. Weather, deep, ocean, atmospheric physics, and human vulnerability all converge here. And when they do, the line between natural disaster and unsolved mystery becomes impossibly thin. By the time the Bermuda Triangle entered the global imagination in the mid-20th century, it had already accumulated centuries of maritime fear and a handful of high-profile aviation disasters. But facts alone cannot sustain a legend. What truly elevated the triangle from geographic anomaly to cultural phenomenon were the theories, some rational, some bizarre, some fascinatingly impossible, that attempted to explain its strange reputation. This chapter dives into those theories, the scientific, the speculative, and the downright fantastical. Understanding them is essential not just because they shape the story of the triangle, but because they reveal something deeper about human psychology. When confronted with the unknown, humans craft narratives. When confronted with absence, they build meaning. The Bermuda Triangle is in many ways a reflection of our desire to explain what we fear. Some theories attempt to anchor themselves in science, others soar into realms untouched by logic. But all of them, every hypothesis ever proposed, tells us as much about ourselves as it does about the ocean. The first category is the rational theories, explanations based on known forces of nature, physics, and human error. These ideas aim to tame the triangle's mystery with logic. They argue that the triangle is dangerous not because it is cursed or supernatural, but because it is complex. And complexity, when misunderstood, looks like chaos. We begin with one of the earliest and most persistent theories, magnetic anomalies. The idea is rooted in fact. The Earth's magnetic field is not uniform. It shifts, warps, and twists across the globe. Certain regions, known as magnetic variation zones, can cause compasses to behave unpredictably. The Bermuda Triangle lies near one of these zones where true north and magnetic north align unusually. Navigators, unfamiliar with this alignment, may misinterpret their headings, sending them miles off course. To early sailors navigating by compass, this phenomenon was terrifying. A compass that shifts even a few degrees can lead a ship astray, and a ship that drifts off course in the Atlantic risks deadly storms, treacherous currents, and unseen reefs. In aviation, the stakes are even higher. A minor heading error can send a pilot dramatically off route in less than an hour. While compass variation alone cannot account for every disappearance, it is a powerful ingredient in the triangle's recipe for disaster. It quietly nudges navigators toward peril and disguises human error as supernatural influence. Another scientific theory centers on rogue waves, enormous walls of water that rise suddenly from the sea. For centuries, these waves were considered sailors' tales, exaggerations, or hallucinations born from fear and fatigue. But satellite imagery and modern oceanographic studies have proven their existence. Rogue waves can reach heights of over 100 feet, powerful enough to snap massive ships in half. The Bermuda Triangle, with its converging currents and unpredictable weather, is an ideal breeding ground for such waves. A vessel struck by a rogue wave may capsize instantly. And because these waves appear and disappear within minutes, search teams arriving after the storm would find calm seas, leading to confusion and speculation. The triangle's deep ocean trenches add another layer of danger. A ship that sinks into the Puerto Rico Trench nearly 6 miles deep is unlikely ever to be found. Ocean pressure at those depths crushes wreckage, currents scatter remains. The absence of evidence in turn fuels mystery. Then there are methane hydrate eruptions, one of the more dramatic scientific theories. Methane gas trapped under the ocean floor can erupt when destabilized, forming massive bubbles that reduce water density. A ship floating over such a bubble loses buoyancy and sinks instantly. This phenomenon has been replicated in laboratory experiments, demonstrating that an otherwise stable vessel can vanish without producing floating debris. Though methane eruptions are rare, their existence cannot be ignored. In a region known for seismic activity and shifting ocean floors, the possibility of methane-related sinking is real. And because gas leaves no physical trace, the ocean would reveal nothing after swallowing a ship in such a manner. But as compelling as these scientific theories are, they do not satisfy everyone. The Bermuda Triangle's legend persists because some disappearances feel too strange, too sudden, too clean to be explained by simple natural forces. And so, the second category of theories, the speculative and paranormal, emerges. These theories tap directly into the human fascination with the extraordinary. They are the ideas whispered in bars, debated on radio shows, and dramatized in documentaries. They are unproven, unscientific, and often unbelievable, but they are irresistible. One of the most popular paranormal theories involves time distortion. The idea suggests that certain regions of the triangle behave like pockets of warped time where the laws of physics bend. Pilots have reported unusual acceleration or deceleration in the region, leading some to believe that aircraft may slip into temporal anomalies. Stories circulate of planes arriving far sooner than they should, or perceiving the passage of time differently. These claims are anecdotal, unverifiable, and often exaggerated, but they persist, fueled by pop culture and the triangle's mythic aura. Humans are captivated by the idea of time, behaving strangely, of doors opening into moments outside our control. Another paranormal theory revolves around electronic fog, a phenomenon described by several pilots who flew through the region in the late 20th century. According to their accounts, a greyish mist clung to their aircraft, causing instruments to malfunction and disorienting their senses. Navigation systems spun wildly. Radios crackled, visual references disappeared. Some pilots claimed they emerged from the fog, miles off course, as if thrown through space. Though electronic fog can be explained through atmospheric electricity, temperature, inversion, or high humidity, the paranormal interpretation suggests that the fog acts as a portal or envelope, something that lifts aircraft out of normal space and carries them into the unknown. This idea is dramatic, cinematic, and scientifically dubious, but it resonates with the public imagination, which loves stories of mysterious clouds and vanishing planes. The third major paranormal theory involves extraterrestrial activity. This concept gained traction during the UFO-obsessed culture of the 1950s and 1960s. The argument suggests that the triangle acts as a corridor or gateway for alien craft who allegedly abduct planes and ships for study or experimentation. Proponents point to the suddenness of certain disappearances, especially those with no distress calls, as evidence of rapid, intelligent intervention. There is, of course, no proof to support this theory. It relies on conjecture, sensationalism, and the public's long-standing fascination with extraterrestrials. But because the triangle intersects with an area of the ocean where radar coverage was historically weak, the idea of hidden activity thrives in the absence of data. One of the more elaborate variations of the alien hypothesis suggests the existence of an underwater base, an extraterrestrial outpost buried beneath the deep Atlantic. According to this theory, the base emits signals or energy fields that disrupt navigation systems or interact with passing vessels. Some believers cite unusual sonar readings or unexplained undersea formations as evidence. Like many paranormal theories, the appeal lies not in its plausibility, but in its narrative power. It provides a coherent story, intelligent design, hidden technology purpose behind the chaos, and humans crave narrative closure. Another fantastical theory proposes that the Bermuda Triangle is the site of remnants from Atlantis, the legendary lost civilization. According to this idea, the ancient Atlanteans possessed advanced technology capable of generating energy fields or manipulating magnetic forces. These remnants allegedly still operate beneath the ocean, interfering with ships and aircraft. This theory gained popularity in the 1970s, fueled by a wave of pseudo-scientific books and documentaries. While Atlantis itself remains unverified, the idea that an ancient civilization harnessed unknown energy sources has a timeless allure. Still, no physical evidence supports this claim. It remains a myth layered onto another myth. One of the most extreme theories suggests that the Bermuda Triangle is a portal to another dimension, a gateway through which physical objects slip into alternate realms. This idea attempts to explain why wreckage is rarely found. If an aircraft or ship crosses an invisible threshold, proponents argue it does not sink, it simply ceases to exist in our world. From a scientific perspective, this is nonsensical. There is no mechanism known to physics that allows objects to spontaneously cross dimensions in the manner described. But the theory thrives because it provides an elegant explanation for vanishing without trace. Humans resist randomness. They prefer an extraordinary explanation to the mundane reality that the ocean is vast and unforgiving. Then there is the psychological theory, perhaps the most compelling of all. It argues that the Bermuda Triangle is not a place of supernatural mystery, but a place where human cognitive bias turns coincidental events into a pattern. When people expect weirdness, they see weirdness. When they hear about disappearances, they assume a cause. When they confront incomplete data, they fill the gaps with imagination. This theory does not deny that tragedies occur. Instead, it explains why the region is perceived as uniquely dangerous. The human brain is wired to recognize patterns even where none exist. It seeks meaning, narrative, and causation. The Bermuda Triangle offers an irresistible canvas onto which humans project their fears, beliefs, and desires for the extraordinary. So which theory is correct? None of them explain everything. Many explain something. But the truth likely lies somewhere in the overlap, a blend of natural forces, human error, environmental complexity, and psychological amplification. The scientific theories provide structure. The paranormal theories provide fascination. The psychological theories explain our fascination itself. Yet if one examines the history of the Bermuda Triangle carefully, one pattern emerges with striking clarity. The legend thrives not on evidence, but on absence. Absence of wreckage, absence of survivors, absence of certainty. The ocean conceals more than it reveals, and this concealment invites speculation. The triangle endures because it resists closure, because it refuses to be simple. Because the moment one explanation seems sufficient, another incident arises that challenges it. In the next chapter, we will move deeper into the stories themselves, eyewitness accounts, pilot testimonies, and those chilling last known transmissions that haunt the narrative of the Triangle. These voices, captured across decades, provide the raw material that continues to keep the legend alive. But for now, remember this: theories thrive in the space where facts cannot reach. And in the Bermuda Triangle, that space is vast. If theories give shape to the Bermuda Triangle, then testimonies give it a heartbeat. Human voices, trembling, confident, confused, or eerily calm, form the living core of the triangle's legend. These accounts, stretching back more than a century, offer more than stories. They offer glimpses into moments when ordinary people confronted something they could not explain. The ocean does not speak, the sky does not clarify. But the people who encounter the triangle leave behind echoes, radio transmissions, logbook entries, eyewitness descriptions, fragments of human perception captured at the edge of reason. And though some of these accounts can be explained by science, many resist simple categorization. Their raw emotion, their detail, and their unsettling consistency make them essential to understanding the enduring mystery. This chapter explores the voices of those who experience the Bermuda Triangle firsthand: pilots, sailors, Coast Guard crews, survivors, and those whose final words still drift through history like signals lost in static. We begin with aviation, not because it is the only source of testimony, but because the contrast between the precision of flight and the chaos of the triangle is especially striking. Pilots are highly trained observers. Their instruments record their journey. Their radios provide real-time communication. When a modern pilot says something is wrong, we listen. One of the most enduring testimonies comes from Bruce Gernon, a private pilot who flew through the region in the year 1970 en route from Andros Island to Palm Beach. According to Gernon, the sky was clear that morning. The horizon sparkled with the promise of an easy flight. But as he climbed through 2,000 feet, he saw something unusual, an oval-shaped cloud, perfectly smooth, rising in front of him. It was not the shape that startled him, but the speed at which it grew, expanding outward like a bubble. As Gernon flew toward it, a tunnel formed through the cloud, a swirling corridor of mist. With no safe alternative, he entered it. The walls seemed to pulse as if alive, his instruments malfunctioned, his compass spun, visibility collapsed. He described the experience as flying inside a grey void with no sense of up or down. When he finally emerged, he found himself far closer to Florida than the elapsed time should have allowed. It was as if part of the flight had vanished, erased from the journey like missing frames from a film. His story is one of the most cited examples of electronic fog, a phenomenon still debated among meteorologists and pilots. Gernon's account, detailed and unwavering, cannot be dismissed easily. Yet skeptics argue that strong tailwinds or instrument misreadings may have played a role. Even so, the testimony stands as one of the triangle's most famous first-hand encounters, not because it proves anything supernatural, but because it articulates something many pilots have felt, that the triangle plays tricks with time and space. But aviation testimonies did not begin with Gernon. Decades earlier, pilots flying through the region left behind radio messages that have since become part of triangle lore. Take the case of the DC-3 aircraft that vanished in the year 1948 while flying from San Juan to Miami. The flight was routine, the weather mostly calm, yet as the plane approached Florida, radio communication became strangely inconsistent. The pilot, Robert Lindquist, sent a message stating his position. It was clear, professional, and entirely ordinary. Then, silence. The plane never arrived. Search teams spent weeks covering thousands of square miles. No wreckage, no oil slick, no debris. The case remains one of the most perplexing in aviation history. Lindquist's final transmission provided no hint of trouble, no mention of weather, no mechanical issues, no fear, nothing. It was as if the entire plane, along with its passengers, simply ceased to exist. The absence of distress is what haunts investigators. A crisis usually creates chaos on the radio. This one left none. But perhaps the most chilling aviation testimony is the one associated with Flight 19, the legendary disappearance that cemented the triangle in modern consciousness. Before the squadron vanished, several transmissions were recorded. The most unsettling came from Lieutenant Charles Taylor, the flight leader. "Everything looks wrong," he said. "Even the ocean looks strange." These words, simple yet deeply unsettling, have been analyzed endlessly. What did he mean? Was the water reflecting unusually? Was visibility distorted? Or was Taylor experiencing disorientation, a psychological or atmospheric effect that made familiar landscapes appear alien? We cannot know. But his testimony, broadcast across radios that now serve as historical artifacts, remains one of the most iconic voices of the Triangle. The radio communications during Flight 19 grew increasingly desperate. One pilot said, "We can't tell where we are." Another voice broke in, "Damn it, if we could just see land." The final transmission, barely audible, was hauntingly calm. "It looks like we're entering white water. We're completely lost." Then the radios went silent. These voices, captured in real time as tragedy unfolded, continue to inspire debate. Were the pilots confused by magnetic variation, lost in a storm, disoriented by unusual cloud formations, or did something more mysterious occur? The power of these testimonies lies not in their clarity, but in their uncertainty. But aviation is only part of the story. The Bermuda Triangle's earliest testimonies come from sailors, the men who braved the Atlantic long before radios, radar, or GPS. Their accounts are written in logbooks, carved into journals, or preserved in the oral traditions of their crews. One of the earliest recorded encounters occurred in the late 1600s, when a British merchant ship traveling through the region reported great pillars of water descending from the heavens. The captain described waterspouts so large they seemed to touch the sky. The ship survived, but only barely. Many others were not as fortunate. The crew believed the sea itself was rising to strike them. Sailors in the 1800s recorded stories of the sea glowing at night, an eerie, milky light stretching across the water. Today we identify this as bioluminescence, but to sailors of that era it was supernatural. Some wrote that the glow rippled like breathing, as if the ocean possessed lungs. A particularly famous maritime testimony comes from the crew of the Ellen Austin, a schooner that encountered a drifting vessel in the Triangle in the year 1881. The abandoned ship was in perfect condition, sails intact, cargo untouched, but no crew. The Ellen Austin's captain sent a prize crew aboard to sail the abandoned ship to port. Days later, during a storm, the vessels became separated. When the Ellen Austin found the prize ship again, it was empty. The crew placed aboard had vanished, just like the original crew before them. No sign of struggle, no damage, nothing. Skeptics argue the account may have been exaggerated or misreported, but the testimony remains a staple of Triangle lore. It captures the eerie tranquility of an abandoned ship drifting silently across the sea, a ghost vessel gliding over waters where time seems to stall. Another powerful testimony came from the USS Supply in the year 1963. The crew reported seeing a massive object under the water, cigar-shaped, metallic, and moving at extraordinary speed. It passed beneath the ship, leaving officers stunned. The report was officially logged, but its explanation remains unknown. Some claim it was a submarine. Others describe it as an unidentified submerged object. Whatever it was, it left a lasting impression on those who saw it. Modern testimonies, though less dramatic, still paint a picture of a region where strange things happen with surprising regularity. Commercial pilots have reported clear sky turbulence, violent shaking in completely calm weather. Charterboat captains describe compasses spinning for several seconds before stabilizing. Divers speak of sudden cold spots in warm water or currents that shift direction unpredictably. Coast Guard logs include cases where radio signals from distressed vessels arrived distorted as if bent or stretched. Some transmissions contained echoes of the speaker's voice, unnatural reverberations that technicians could not explain. Atmospheric interference, perhaps. or something else. One of the most unsettling modern testimonies came from a Bahamas-based fisherman in the year 2009. He reported seeing a wall of fog forming rapidly ahead of his boat, not drifting naturally across the sea, but rising vertically like a curtain. When he turned his boat to avoid it, the fog followed. Not in a supernatural sense, but in a way that made no meteorological sense. It seemed to expand outward with intentional speed, enveloping everything in a matter of minutes. His GPS froze, the boat's engine sputtered. For several minutes, he drifted blind. When the fog finally dissipated, he found himself miles off course without any clear explanation for how he had drifted so far in such a short time. Weather experts attribute this kind of testimony to microclimates, intense local disturbances created by rapid temperature shifts between the sea and sky. But the fisherman's account remains vivid, detailed, and unsettlingly consistent with other electronic fog reports. Even cruise ship passengers, traveling in vessels far larger and more stable than the ships of earlier centuries, have left behind disturbing testimonies. Some describe watching the horizon vanish abruptly, replaced by a kind of shimmering haze. Others mention seeing the sea flatten unnaturally, as if the waves were suppressed by an invisible hand. These testimonies could be explained by sudden shifts in wind pressure or humidity, yet they contribute to the triangle's eerie reputation. What ties all these voices together is not that they confirm the supernatural. It is that they describe experiences that rebel against expectation. The Bermuda Triangle is a place where the atmosphere behaves unusually, where instruments glitch, where the sea and sky play tricks on perception. These distortions, natural or not, create the feeling of something otherworldly. Testimonies also reveal the psychological toll of the triangle. Experienced pilots trained to remain calm under pressure describe moments of confusion so profound that even the most basic points of reference, north-south horizon altitude, seem to dissolve. Sailors talk about feeling watched, a sense of presence on the open water. These sensations, though subjective, recur often enough to form a pattern. Voices from the edge share a common theme: disorientation. Whether caused by atmospheric inversion, magnetic variation, unusual light scattering, or intense fear, disorientation changes everything. It blurs reasoning, it amplifies danger, it transforms natural events into mysteries. And when disorientation occurs moments before disappearance, the testimony becomes legendary. One of the final haunting transmissions from the cargo ship SS Sylvia L. Ossa in the year 1976 was recorded as follows: "Everything just went dark." The message was fragmented, almost swallowed by static. Some believe the crew meant a sudden weather shift, others suspect a power failure. But the phrasing is unnerving, vague, foreboding, final. Minutes later the ship vanished. No debris, no survivors. The ocean keeps its secrets. Voices are all that remain, testimonies are imperfect, memory is flawed, radios distort, fear exaggerates. But when hundreds of accounts spanning decades echo the same experiences: strange fog, malfunctioning instruments, sudden storms, visual distortion, a pattern emerges that cannot be dismissed. Voices from the edge shape the legend because they represent humans struggling to interpret events that defy intuitive logic. The triangle may not be supernatural, but the experiences of those who survive it often feel as though they brush against something beyond ordinary understanding. As we move into the next chapter, we will examine the disappearances that shaped public perception, the iconic cases that fueled decades of speculation and continue to haunt investigators. These are not just stories. They are warnings, questions, and reminders of the ocean's indifference. But before we turn the page, remember this: the Bermuda Triangle's most powerful evidence is not found in data wreckage or charts. It is found in the human voice, trembling, confused, awestruck, and sometimes whispering from the brink of the unknown. Some disappearances are facts, some are rumors, and some become milestones, defining moments that carve themselves into the public imagination and transform ordinary tragedies into mythic narratives. For the Bermuda Triangle, a handful of vanishings became more than isolated events. They became symbols, anchoring the legend in stories that are retold year after year, generation after generation. These cases, stretching from the 19th century to the 21st, illustrate how the triangle evolved from mere maritime danger into a cultural phenomenon. They also reveal the common threads: sudden silence, missing wreckage, unexplainable conditions that keep researchers, skeptics, and believers arguing even today. This chapter explores the disappearances that shaped the legend. They are not the only vanishings, nor always the most tragic, but they are the ones that changed the world's understanding of the triangle. We begin with a case so massive and so perplexing that even naval historians still debate its fate: the USS Cyclops. The Cyclops was a colossus, a nearly 600-foot naval collier tasked with transporting vital manganese ore for the American military. In early March of the year 1918, it left Barbados with 309 people aboard, including experienced officers and crew. The weather was calm, the route was standard, no threats were reported. Then the Cyclops vanished. There was no distress call, no signal flare, no debris, no survivors. The ship simply failed to arrive in Baltimore, and despite one of the largest search operations of its time, the ocean offered no clues. To this day, the disappearance of the Cyclops remains the largest non-combat loss of life in American naval history. Its scale alone vaulted the Bermuda Triangle into early 20th century discussion even before the region had a name. What happened to the Cyclops? Some believe the ship was overloaded with ore, making it unstable. Others suggest it suffered a catastrophic hull failure. A few speculate that it was sabotaged. But none of these explanations fully satisfy. A ship that large does not simply vanish without leaving debris. The complete lack of wreckage pushes the disappearance into the realm of the inexplicable. Decades later, two sister ships, the Proteus in the year 1941 and the Nereus in the year 1942, also vanished in the Atlantic under mysterious circumstances while carrying ore. Though neither disappeared within the exact boundaries of the triangle, the parallels were enough to fuel speculation that something about the cargo, the route, or the region itself contributed to the pattern. But the Cyclops alone established a template: large vessel, experienced crew, routine voyage, sudden silence. That template would appear again and again. The next major case was the one that truly launched the triangle into mainstream culture. Flight 19, the infamous vanishing of 5 American torpedo bombers in the year 1945. This squadron, consisting of 14 men in total, departed Fort Lauderdale for a routine training mission on a clear December afternoon. Then everything fell apart. The flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, reported that his compasses were malfunctioning. He could not recognize any landmarks. The other pilots followed his lead. They believed they were flying near the Florida Keys, when in reality they were far offshore. Their fuel dwindled. Their radios crackled with confusion, frustration, and fear. Then, silence. A rescue plane was dispatched to search for them, and it too vanished without a trace. 27 men, 6 aircraft. No confirmed wreckage ever found. Flight 19 became a cultural touchstone for the triangle. The final transmissions, the sudden disorientation, the missing debris, all of it fueled theories of supernatural forces, magnetic anomalies, or something far stranger at work. But Flight 19 was not the only aviation mystery to feed the legend. Shortly afterward came the disappearance of the Douglas DC-3 in the year 1948. The plane carried 32 people on a nighttime journey from San Juan to Miami. Radio communication was steady at first. The pilot reported everything normal. Then, abruptly, the radios fell silent. The aircraft never arrived. Despite intense searches covering thousands of square miles, no wreckage was located. The disappearance of such a large commercial aircraft, especially one considered reliable and sturdy, left investigators bewildered. Some blamed electrical failure. Others suspected low tire pressure prevented proper takeoff. But the clean and complete vanishing again, no debris, reinforced the triangle's ominous reputation. Just months later, another plane, Star Tiger, a Tudor Mark IV airliner, vanished in the year 1948 on its way to Bermuda. The flight was uneventful. The weather was stable. The crew sent routine position reports. Then the aircraft simply stopped communicating. No distress call, no fragments, no trace of the passengers or crew. The following year, in 1949, the Star Aerial's sister plane to Star Tiger disappeared on a similar route. 2 aircraft, 2 years, similar conditions, identical mysteries. The odds of such back-to-back vanishings without debris are statistically microscopic, yet it happened. Aviation investigators struggled for explanations: mechanical malfunction, fuel mismanagement, pilot error. But nothing aligned with the atmospheric calm reported during the flights. To the public, the disappearances formed a pattern, an eerie trilogy of aircraft swallowed by the Atlantic. To skeptics, they were tragic coincidences. To believers, they were proof of a deeper, more sinister phenomenon. Then there was the strange case of the Marine Sulphur Queen in the year 1963. The ship, more than 400 feet long, carried molten sulfur, a dangerous but manageable cargo, on a voyage from Texas to Norfolk. It never arrived. Investigators found only a few pieces of debris, none conclusive enough to indicate the cause of the sinking. The Coast Guard speculated that faulty structural reinforcements or the intense heat of the cargo might have compromised the hull. But without more evidence, the disappearance remained unsolved. Another vessel vanished in an equally baffling manner in the year 1967, the cabin cruiser Witchcraft, carrying hotel owner Dan Burak and his friend, Father Patrick Horgan. They sailed just outside Miami's harbor to view Christmas lights from the sea. The boat was less than 2 miles offshore, well within sight of the city, when Burak reported that his vessel had hit something. He requested assistance. The Coast Guard dispatched a rescue team immediately. When they arrived, Witchcraft was gone. No wreckage, no oil slick, no sign of struggle. The water was calm. The disappearance of a boat so close to land, in view of Miami's skyline, remains one of the Triangle's most disturbing mysteries. Shortly afterward came the vanishing of the SS Silvia L. Ossa in the year 1976. The ship transmitted an eerie final message. Everything just went dark. Minutes later, it disappeared from radar. No trace was ever recovered. But disappearances did not stop in the 20th century. Even in the 21st century, with GPS, satellite, weather tracking and advanced communication, the Triangle continues to claim vessels. One particularly haunting case occurred in the year 2013, when a small twin-engine aircraft carrying a mother and her 2 children vanished while flying from Puerto Rico to Florida. Some debris washed ashore days later, but the majority of the aircraft remained missing. Another case took place in the year 2017, when a private plane disappeared near the Bahamas. Again, small fragments were found, but the core wreckage and the reason for its sudden plunge remain unknown. These modern vanishings add to the Triangle's lore, not because they are supernatural, but because they echo the same pattern. Sudden silence, rapid disappearance, minimal debris, no single explanation. That consistency is unsettling. It is the reason the Bermuda Triangle refuses to die as a legend. But the most disturbing cases are not always the most famous. Some slip through history unnoticed, overshadowed by larger tragedies. Yet they offer crucial insight into the Triangle's pattern. In the year 1969, the sailing yacht Revenok, captained by a highly experienced sailor, disappeared with all hands on a calm day. In the year 1974, the cargo ship Anita, more than 600 feet long, vanished with 52 crew members aboard. Investigators believe the ship may have encountered rogue waves or structural failure, but again, no definitive evidence was ever found. The case of the Gloria Calite, a freighter found abandoned in the year 1968, is particularly chilling. The ship was discovered adrift without a crew. The radio was functional. The engine was working. Meals were set on tables. Logs ended abruptly. It mirrored the eerie story of the Ellen Austin from nearly a century earlier. There is a reason abandoned ships more than sunk ships terrify the imagination. A sunken vessel leaves at least a narrative, a storm, a collision, a wave. An abandoned vessel suggests something else entirely, that the crew chose to leave or fled. But fled from what? Wind, waves, mutiny, panic, or something they could not name. The Bermuda Triangle thrives on these ambiguities. It feeds on empty decks and open logbooks, on sudden silences and missing wreckage. Each disappearance builds on the last, creating an architecture of fear and fascination. Yet it is essential to remind ourselves the Triangle is one of the most heavily traveled shipping and flight corridors in the world. Thousands of vessels pass through it each year without incident. Most disappearances have rational explanations: storms, equipment failure, human error. But the handful that do not, those become the pillars of legend. These iconic cases, the Cyclops Flight 19, the DC 3-star Tiger Star, Ariel the Marine Sulphur Queen Witchcraft, offer a narrative spine for everything people believe about the Triangle. They have the perfect ingredients for myth-building, mystery, scale, silence, and unanswered questions. But they also reveal something deeper, perhaps. The Bermuda Triangle is not unique because of the number of tragedies, but because of the nature of those tragedies. The ocean is vast, but here it feels immeasurable. Weather is chaotic, but here it feels vindictive. Navigation errors are common, but here they feel predestined. Disappearances happen worldwide, but here they feel personal, targeted. Whether these vanishings are the result of unusual environmental forces, unlucky navigational circumstances, or the human mind's need for patterns, they have shaped a legend unlike any other in modern history. As we move into the next chapter, we will look beyond vanishings and testimonies to explore how the Bermuda Triangle entrenched itself in pop culture, how these tragedies became stories, then myths, then global fascination. But before that, reflect on this. A mystery survives not because of what we know, but because of what we do not. And in the Bermuda Triangle, the unknown is endless. By the time the 20th century reached its midpoint, the Bermuda Triangle had already accumulated a strange and varied history. Ghost ships adrift, vanishing aircraft, lost naval colliers, and a pattern of disappearances that felt too deliberate to dismiss as coincidence. But there is a difference between a mystery and a phenomenon. A mystery remains hidden, whispered among sailors and pilots. A phenomenon becomes a story told in living rooms, movie theaters, late-night radio shows, and supermarket tabloids. The Bermuda Triangle crossed that line, not through science, not through government investigations, but through culture, through the human need to turn the unknown into narrative. This transformation from maritime curiosity to global obsession began slowly, then accelerated with the force of a tidal wave. To understand the Triangle today, one must understand how its image was shaped by storytellers, journalists, filmmakers, and conspiracy theorists. Pop culture did not merely amplify the Bermuda Triangle, it sculpted, it gave it an identity, and broadcast it across the world. And in return, the Triangle gave pop culture something irresistible, a story with no ending. The first major spark arrived in the early 20th century when a handful of newspaper reporters began linking disappearances into a larger pattern. Newspapers in the 1920s and 1930s thrived on sensationalism. Stories of ghost ships and missing pilots sold papers. Editors hungry for dramatic headlines emphasized the mysterious aspects of maritime tragedies while downplaying rational explanations. Even so, the triangle remained a niche curiosity, intriguing but not yet legendary. Then came December of 1945 and the disappearance of Flight 19. The tragedy dominated American and European newspapers. Headlines shouted phrases like "Lost in the Devil's Triangle" and "Planes vanish without a trace." Journalists speculated freely, often with little regard for accuracy. A routine aviation training accident became, through media interpretation, an unsolved cosmic puzzle. When a rescue plane also disappeared, the story became iconic. The combination of scale, timing, and mystery captured the public imagination. The triangle now had its first true myth. But it was not until the late 1960s and early 1970s that the Bermuda Triangle genuinely exploded into global consciousness. This was the era of space exploration, UFO sightings, and renewed interest in paranormal phenomena. The world was hungry for mysteries. Audiences wanted stories that challenged the boundaries of science, and writers were eager to supply them. Enter Vincent Gaddis, an American author who in the year 1964 published an article in Argosy magazine titled "The Deadly Bermuda Triangle." In it, Gaddis linked Flight 19, the Cyclops, and several other disappearances into a single narrative. He claimed, with confidence exceeding his evidence, that these vanishings formed a pattern too significant to ignore. The article caused a cultural ripple. It was the first time anyone framed the triangle not as a loose region of strange events, but as a cohesive hazard, a defined zone that swallowed ships and aircraft. But Gaddis did not stop there. He expanded his ideas in the year 1965 with the book Invisible Horizons, which further cemented the concept of a deadly region. His writing was dramatic, theatrical, and intentionally mysterious. Readers devoured it, skeptics rolled their eyes. But the seed had been planted. The real cultural earthquake came a decade later with the publication of Charles Berlitz's best-selling book, The Bermuda Triangle, in the year 1974. Berlitz, a linguist and author, fascinated with the paranormal, compiled stories of disappearances, strange clouds, UFO encounters, and alleged government cover-ups. He wrote, not as a skeptic, but as a believer. He treated every unexplained event as a clue pointing toward a larger, darker truth. Berlitz's book exploded onto the bestseller lists, selling millions of copies worldwide. It was translated into dozens of languages. For many, this was their first exposure to the Bermuda Triangle. Berlitz framed the region as an unsolved supernatural mystery, a place where natural laws broke down and strange forces operated beyond human understanding. Television networks followed. Documentaries aired across America and Europe, complete with ominous music and dramatic reenactments. They showed planes slipping into clouds and never emerging, ships sailing into fog then vanishing, compasses spinning wildly. Interviews with survivors, experts, skeptics, and believers turned the Bermuda Triangle into a household name. Pop culture had discovered its new monster, not a creature, but a place. The 1970s and 1980s became a golden age of triangle fascination. Comic books, novels, board games, trading cards, and even children's cartoons featured the Bermuda Triangle. Saturday morning shows depicted the triangle as a portal to parallel worlds, underwater alien cities, or lost civilizations. Science fiction writers imagined time loops, dimensional rifts, and Atlantis-powered energy beams hidden beneath the waves. Hollywood, never one to ignore a trend, joined the frenzy. Films such as The Bermuda Triangle, 1978, dramatized disappearances with supernatural flair. TV shows like In Search of, hosted by Leonard Nimoy, featured episodes exploring the triangle through a blend of folklore and pseudoscience. These productions blurred the line between fact and fantasy, reinforcing the idea that the triangle was not merely dangerous, it was otherworldly. As entertainment amplified, the legend public memory distorted. Real vanishings became exaggerated. Fictional stories were mistaken for fact. Over time, a cultural collage emerged in which truth and fiction merged seamlessly. By the 1980s, the triangle's image was so cemented that it became a touchstone for mystery. Songs referenced it. Comedians joked about it. Even airline passengers, while boarding flights through Miami or Puerto Rico, casually remarked that they hoped the triangle would behave today. The myth had become bigger than the reality. But pop culture was not content to stop at fiction. It wanted explanations, and so an entire industry of pseudo-scientific theories arose. Books claimed to reveal secret Atlantean power crystals beneath the seabed. Television specials suggested alien spacecraft abducted vessels from above or dragged them into underwater bases. Some shows described the triangle as a gateway to the fourth dimension. Others proposed that time loops swallowed ships whole. These ideas were not rooted in science, they were rooted in performance. But they were irresistible to audiences raised on Star Trek UFO sightings and speculative science. One of the most influential shows of the era was Unsolved Mysteries. Its dramatic reenactments and eerie narration framed the triangle as a living enigma, a place where logic faltered. Viewers were encouraged to participate, to think, to question, to imagine. Each episode added new layers to the legend, blending eyewitness accounts with dramatic speculation. By the time the internet arrived in the 1990s, the Bermuda Triangle had become more than a story. It had become a meme long before memes existed. Online forums, conspiracy websites, and digital fan groups revived the triangle for a new generation. Amateur researchers shared maps, theorists debated magnetic anomalies. UFO enthusiasts proposed extraterrestrial gateways. Skeptics attempted to debunk each new claim. The triangle thrived online because it offered something rare, a mystery that anyone could participate in. There were no experts with definitive answers, no closed cases, no final verdict. The lack of resolution was not a weakness, it was the very thing that made the triangle powerful. Video games soon joined the lore. Adventure titles sent players diving into underwater ruins or exploring storms that bent time. Fantasy games portrayed the triangle as a cursed zone, guarded by ancient sea gods or haunted by spirits. The Bermuda Triangle became shorthand for danger, uncertainty, and the supernatural, just as Transylvania represents vampires or Roswell represents aliens. Pop culture did not simply reflect the triangle, it expanded it. As entertainment evolved, so did the Bermuda Triangle's image. In the 2010s, television revived the phenomenon through series like Ancient Aliens, which folded the triangle into a larger narrative of extraterrestrial influence throughout human history. Streaming platforms produced documentaries, blending science, speculation, and archaeological theory. The triangle entered a new era of visibility, reaching younger audiences who had grown up with digital storytelling. What's remarkable is how the triangle adapts. Each generation reshapes it according to its fears and fascinations. In the 1970s, the triangle reflected anxieties about aviation disasters and Cold War mysteries. In the 1990s, it mirrored rising interest in UFOs and government secrecy. In the 21st century, it embodies concerns about environmental chaos, deep-sea exploration, and the limits of human technology. Pop culture evolved, and the triangle evolved with it. But this cultural penetration has a double edge. With every new fictional story, the line between fact and myth blurs further. People forget which disappearances were well documented and which were exaggerated. Some vanishings become iconic simply because they were dramatized. Others fade into obscurity because they were never featured in mass media. The Bermuda Triangle is a hybrid myth woven from equal parts fact, fiction, fear, and fascination. It is a rare phenomenon in which reality is less influential than narrative. It thrives because it is flexible. It accommodates science and superstition equally. It invites theories without demanding evidence. Perhaps its greatest cultural legacy is this: the Bermuda Triangle is a story humanity keeps rewriting. And why do we rewrite it? Because the triangle is not simply about disappearances. It is about limits, the limits of knowledge, the limits of control, the limits of understanding. Humans crave stories that challenge these limits. Pop culture gives those stories shape, voice, and momentum. At its heart, the triangle is a mirror. It reflects each generation's obsessions: exploration, technology, aliens, ancient civilizations, parallel universes, climate fear. It is less about the sea and more about our imagination. As we move into the next chapter, we will shift from pop culture back into the realm of the ocean itself, into science, into myth, into the strange natural phenomena that continue to draw explorers into the region even today. But as we close this chapter, remember, the Bermuda Triangle did not become a legend because of what happened there. It became a legend because of the stories we told about what happened there. And those stories, retold in books, films, shows, forums, and whispered conversations, ensured that the Triangle will remain one of the world's most enduring mysteries. For all the cultural speculation, for all the myths and theories wrapped around the Bermuda Triangle, the greatest force shaping its mystery is not supernatural at all. It is the ocean itself, vast, ancient, and indifferent. Humans tend to see the sea as scenery, a surface shimmer broken only by waves and wind. But beneath that surface lies a world as alien as any planet, full of forces far more powerful and enigmatic than anything in popular mythology. To understand the Bermuda Triangle, one must stop thinking of it as a flat, triangular patch of ocean and start seeing it as a living system, a layered, churning, shifting world where currents behave like rivers, storms build like mountains, and deep-sea trenches yawn like cosmic abysses. It is a place where the sea's hidden machinery is always in motion, a place where the rules of nature are not broken but amplified, a place shaped by secrets we have barely begun to uncover. The first, and perhaps most influential of these forces, is the Gulf Stream, a massive, dynamic current that moves through the Atlantic with the strength of a conveyor belt. Its surface waters travel at extraordinary speed, carrying warmth northward and fueling global climate patterns. But beneath the surface, the Gulf Stream is even more complex. Layers of temperature, salinity, and pressure twist together, creating pockets of turbulence and unexpected vortices. When a ship or plane crashes into such a current, the ocean does not treat it gently. Wreckage is scattered like confetti, dragged downward or outward in unpredictable patterns. A piece of debris that surfaces 1 hour may be swept dozens of miles away the next. This is why so many search operations fail, not because something supernatural hides the evidence, but because nature is relentlessly efficient at erasing it. But the Gulf Stream is only one part of the Triangle's hidden machinery. The region also borders the Sargasso Sea, a vast, floating mass of golden seaweed drifting in a gyre that spirals slowly and silently. To early sailors, the Sargasso Sea was terrifying, a place where ships became trapped in windless calm, surrounded by mats of sticky vegetation. We now know that the Sargasso is home to a complex ecosystem, but the fear it inspired shaped centuries of maritime tradition. The Sargasso behaves differently from most seas. Its currents form a slow-moving whirlpool where debris can drift for months or even years. A ship passing through the triangle might lose cargo or small fragments to the Sargasso, where they disappear into an oceanic graveyard far from the site of any disaster. This separation between accident and debris location adds another layer of confusion to investigations. But even the Sargasso is not the deepest secret beneath the waves. That honor belongs to the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean, a chasm more than 5 miles down, capable of crushing metal and bone with pressures beyond imagination. If the ocean were a sky turned upside down, the trench would be its darkest night. When vessels or aircraft descend into such depths, recovery becomes nearly impossible. Sonar may fail to detect them. Remotely operated vehicles may be unable to withstand the pressure. Even modern exploration has only mapped fragments of this abyss. If something sinks into the trench, it is lost not to mystery but to physics. And yet for all this scientific understanding, the ocean continues to surprise us. Because beneath the surface of the Bermuda Triangle lies not just currents and trenches, but seismic zones, cracks in the Earth's crust, where tectonic plates grind, shift, and send tremors through the seabed. These shifts can destabilize methane hydrates, releasing clouds of gas that rise like enormous underwater ghosts, reducing water density and dragging ships down in seconds. Although these events are rare, they are part of the triangle's natural rhythm, invisible, powerful, and nearly impossible to predict. Another secret of the ocean is its soundscape, a realm where pressure changes, shifting temperature and structural anomalies can bend sound waves in unexpected ways. In the deep Atlantic, sound does not behave like it does on land. It can travel hundreds of miles. It can warp, echo, and distort. Submarines and scientific instruments record strange noises in the triangle: metallic bangs, low-frequency rumbles, whale-like calls, and long, droning hums whose origin remains unknown. Some of these sounds may come from geological activity. Others may come from large marine animals. Some, perhaps many, come from phenomena we have yet to understand. The deeper you go, the stranger the world becomes. Consider the oxygen minimum zones, stretches of water where oxygen levels drop to near zero. These dead zones drift across the Atlantic, affecting marine life and occasionally altering currents. They can create cold patches in warm seas or cause layers of water to separate abruptly. For a ship entering such a zone, the surface may appear calm, while the water below behaves unpredictably, altering buoyancy or stability just enough to create danger. Then there are the thermoclines, distinct layers of water separated by temperature differences. These layers can act like hidden floors or ceilings beneath the waves. Submarines can disappear behind thermoclines, evading sonar or becoming invisible to surface vessels. Debris sinking through one layer may be caught or redirected by another. These invisible barriers can easily confuse search efforts. A wreck resting between two thermoclines might remain undetected for decades, preserved in a cold, stable zone. If the ocean shifts, if temperature or pressure changes, the wreck might move, rise or fall. It is not magic. It is fluid dynamics on a scale most humans never imagine. Another secret of the ocean is how it reflects, refracts, and distorts light. Under certain conditions, sunlight striking the water creates optical illusions, false horizons, inverted reflections, shimmering distortions. These can trick sailors, pilots, and even modern sensors into misreading distances or shapes. A wave crest might look like a reef. A cloud reflection might resemble land. Combine such illusions with stress, fatigue, and sudden weather changes, and disorientation becomes almost inevitable. But perhaps the most profound secret of the ocean is this: we know almost nothing about it. By scientific estimates, humans have explored less than 5% of the ocean floor. Most deep-sea environments remain unmapped. Entire ecosystems thrive there, unseen. Creatures we have never encountered roam through the darkness. Pressure and temperature create chemical reactions unknown elsewhere on Earth. In this context, the Bermuda Triangle is not mysterious because it defies science. It is mysterious because it exposes the limits of our knowledge. The ocean does not reveal what it consumes. It does not explain the vanishings of aircraft or ships. It simply incorporates them into its vast system. A plane sinks, metal corrodes, fish scatter debris, currents drift it away, the trench pulls it deeper. After a decade, after a century, there is nothing left. Even the Titanic, a single massive ship resting on a well-mapped seabed, was only truly found in the 1980s, more than 70 years after it sank. And that was in a far less complex part of the Atlantic than the Triangle. If humanity struggled to locate the Titanic, what hope do we have of finding aircraft that shattered into pieces or ships that plunged into deeper waters? The ocean's greatest secret, then, is its ability to erase evidence, to erase tracks, to erase answers. This erasure is not malicious, it is mechanical, it is mathematical, it is planetary. The Triangle's mythology was built on disappearance, but disappearance is what the ocean does best. Yet the ocean also contains secrets that inspire wonder rather than fear. The Bermuda Triangle lies near one of the most diverse marine ecosystems in the world. Migratory routes for whales, turtles, and giant fish pass through its waters. Some of the largest underwater mountain ranges, hidden peaks taller than the Rockies, rise from its floor. There are even underwater lakes, pockets of hypersaline brine that sit like puddles at the bottom of the sea. When submersibles approach them, their instruments behave strangely. Lights reflect oddly. Pressure changes abruptly. If a wreck crossed into such an environment, its descent and deterioration would differ dramatically from normal oceanic conditions. These lakes, along with hydrothermal vents, methane seeps, and deep-sea volcanoes, create conditions that can dissolve metal, swallow debris, or shift wreckage unexpectedly. Imagine a plane's fuselage drifting downward into a volcanic vent area. Within months, it might break apart, melt, or become buried under sediment. No television documentary, no conspiracy theory, no sensational book explains these mundane, destructive processes. Yet they are the most powerful forces acting in the Triangle. Add all these elements together: currents, trenches, thermoclines, seismic activity, gas eruptions, optical illusions, complex sound patterns, unexplored terrain, and the Bermuda Triangle becomes not a supernatural puzzle, but a natural gauntlet. The ocean's secrets are not mystical, they are physical. But physical does not mean simple, and their complexity is what sustains the Triangle's mystery. In the final analysis, the Bermuda Triangle is not an anomaly of nature. It is a mirror of it. It reveals how fragile ships and aircraft truly are, how limited human perception remains, how incomplete our exploration of the deep ocean continues to be. The Triangle endures not because something violates the laws of physics there, but because everything, every force, every factor, every flaw of nature and technology aligns there in potent, unpredictable combinations. In the next chapter, we will confront the heart of the legend. Is the Bermuda Triangle truly more dangerous than anywhere else on Earth? Is it a statistical anomaly, a coincidence, a myth, or something in between? But as we leave this chapter behind, remember one truth: the ocean keeps more secrets than humanity has questions, and the Bermuda Triangle is where many of those secrets live. After 9 chapters of history, science, eyewitness accounts, vanishings, and cultural fascination, we arrive at the question that has haunted researchers, skeptics, and storytellers for more than a century. Is the Bermuda Triangle truly different from anywhere else on Earth? It is a deceptively simple Question the kind that seems to demand a yes or no answer. But the truth, like the triangle itself, is far more complicated. It lives in the shadows between legend and data, between human psychology and natural forces, between what is known and what remains beyond our reach. To answer the question honestly, we must examine the Bermuda Triangle, not as a supernatural anomaly and not as a dismissed myth, but as a dynamic intersection of environment, human perception, history, and imagination. We must confront the possibility that the triangle is both less mysterious and more profound than we think. We start with the numbers, the cold statistical truth. When researchers look at maritime and aviation accident rates across the world, they often find that the Bermuda Triangle does not stand out dramatically. The Pacific Ocean claims far more vessels. The Indian Ocean devours entire aircraft, as in the disappearance of Flight MH370 in the year 2014. Even the Mediterranean has a long history of vanishings. To purely statistical minds, the Bermuda Triangle is not abnormal. It is a heavily trafficked region with unpredictable weather and complex oceanographic conditions. High traffic means a higher likelihood of accidents. This is the simplest explanation. Yet statistics alone cannot erase the mystique. Other regions may be dangerous, but none have entered global consciousness the way the Triangle has. And statistics do not account for the patterns that make these incidents so compelling. Sudden radio silence, lack of debris, experienced crews, clear skies turning chaotic within minutes, multiple disappearances in similar locations, stories spanning centuries. If data were enough, the legend would have faded decades ago. But humans navigate the world through narrative as much as numbers, and the Triangle's narrative is powerful. Consider the role of environmental convergence. The Bermuda Triangle sits at an intersection of forces rarely found in one place. The Gulf Stream, deep trenches, unstable weather, magnetic variation, methane hydrate zones, heavy traffic, atmospheric inversions, microbursts, waterspouts, thermoclines, seismic tremors, ocean dead zones. Individually, each force is understandable. Together, they create a region where nature behaves dramatically, sometimes violently, and often unpredictably. This convergence does not break the laws of physics, but it stretches them in ways that push human technology, navigation, and perception to their limits. So the question becomes, if the triangle is not statistically unique, does that mean it is not mysterious? Not at all. Mystery does not require statistical superiority. Mystery requires inconsistency, complexity, and unanswered questions. And the triangle has those in abundance. Take the issue of debris. When vessels go down elsewhere, debris often surfaces. Rescue teams find wreckage, oil slicks, or bodies' tragic but informative signs. In the Bermuda Triangle, however, vanishings often leave nothing. This absence is not impossible, but it is unusual. The Gulf Stream explains some of this. Deep trenches explain more. But the frequency of total erasure, especially in 20th century aviation accidents, remains unsettling. Then there is the matter of eyewitness experiences. When pilots, sailors, and scientists describe electronic fog, compass malfunction, distorted horizons, or sudden disorientation, their testimonies are not easily dismissed as hallucination or human error. These accounts share a remarkable consistency across generations, cultures, and backgrounds. Patterns in subjective experience matter. They reveal something about the environment or about how humans respond to it that traditional data does not capture. And then we must address psychology. Human beings are pattern seekers. We see connections even where none exist because our brains are wired to create meaning. The Bermuda Triangle is fertile ground for such meaning-making. When a ship sinks in the North Sea, it is a tragedy. When a ship sinks in the Bermuda Triangle, it is a clue. Context shapes perception. the triangle has become a lens through which we view events. If a vessel disappears even slightly off course, the triangle myth frames it as extraordinary. So is the legend real simply because we believe it? In a way, yes. A phenomenon becomes real the moment it becomes culturally powerful. A myth becomes real the moment it shapes behavior, fear, and interpretation. And the triangle is one of the strongest myths of the modern age. But myths are not necessarily false. They can point toward truths that are difficult to articulate. One truth is that the ocean remains vastly unexplored. The Bermuda Triangle forces us to confront this reality. Another truth is that human technology, despite its sophistication, is fragile when confronted by storms, waves, and atmospheric conditions beyond our control. A third truth is that the ocean is not passive. It is a system of dynamic competing forces that can create unpredictable outcomes in minutes. A fourth truth is that human perception itself breaks down under pressure in fog, in storms, in disorienting light and sound. Many tragedies in the triangle likely began with confusion, a pilot misjudging distance, a sailor misunderstanding a compass, a captain underestimating a storm. But the deepest truth is this: the Bermuda Triangle matters because it sits at the crossroads of fear and imagination. Humans fear what we cannot control. Humans imagine what we cannot understand. The triangle is a symbolic frontier, a reminder that our maps, satellites, and digital tools do not give us full mastery of the world. It exposes the fragility of certainty. For the United States and Europe, cultures built on exploration, technology, and dominion over nature, the triangle represents a humbling force. It challenges assumptions. It pushes back against the idea that we understand everything. This, more than anything, explains its longevity. But does that mean the triangle is paranormal, supernatural, home to alien bases, time warps, or dimensional rifts? Science offers no evidence for such claims. Yet science does not fully erase the possibility that phenomena exist that we do not yet understand. What complicates matters further is that the legend itself influences events. Pilots flying through the region are aware of the myth. Sailors carry its weight. Fear changes perception. Stress affects decision-making. Anxiety amplifies mistakes. A pilot who believes instruments are acting strangely may misread them. A sailor who fears the triangle may interpret natural phenomena as unnatural. Stories shape experience. Experience shapes stories. This feedback loop keeps the mythology alive. But for all the speculation, for all the documentaries and novels and late-night debates, the central question remains: what is the Bermuda Triangle? A statistical illusion, a geographical hotspot of intense natural forces, a cultural myth amplified into reality. A combination of all three. Perhaps the most accurate answer is this: the Bermuda Triangle is a mystery created by the collision of human vulnerability and natural power. It is an environment that amplifies risk, magnifies error, and accelerates disaster. It is a story we have been telling for centuries because it speaks to our deepest fears. It is a reminder of how little we truly control. And yet, despite the fear, the triangle continues to draw explorers, scientists searching for answers, tourists intrigued by the legend, adventurers tempted by the unknown. The region is not empty. It is alive with life, travel, and activity. Every day ships cross it. Every day planes fly above it. Every day people test its boundaries. Most return home safely, some do not. But whether we view the Bermuda Triangle as a danger, a myth, or a puzzle, one truth remains constant. The mystery endures because we need it to. In an age of satellites, quantum physics, and global connectivity, we crave places where certainty fails. We crave reminders that the world is larger and stranger than we imagine. The triangle fills that role. It is an anchor for the unknown, a beacon for the imaginative, a sanctuary for wonder. As we close this chapter and the core of our exploration, the final question is not, is the Bermuda Triangle real? The real question is, why does the Bermuda Triangle matter to us? It matters because it reminds us that the Earth still has edges. It matters because it humbles us. It matters because it challenges the arrogance of knowledge. It matters because it whispers that the world still holds secrets. And perhaps most importantly, it matters because mystery, true enduring mystery, is rare. The Bermuda Triangle may be explained one day fully and completely by science, or it may remain forever ambiguous, a legend bound to the deep. Either way, it stands as a testament to the most powerful force in the human experience. Our desire to understand the unknown and our willingness to be enchanted by it when understanding fails.